everyone, welcome back to Note to Shelf. Today I wanted to do a bit of a reading wrap up of what I've read lately. Honestly, it's not as much as I would like. This is combining what I read for February and March, and even then it's not a lot. So first up in February, I read a grand total of one book. And that book was Rings of Fate by Melissa De La Cruz. And honestly, I'm kind of sad to say it, but I don't think I liked it very much. I think I wanted to like it. I was very confused too because whenever I read it, I didn't want to put it down. I would read for hours, and I would think about it when I wasn't reading it. I wanted to read it. And there were moments that I found funny, they made me laugh. But I think it's just like throughout the book, it was just like these little things would come up and they would keep building up. Eventually, I figured that it was too much. I was more annoyed than anything. And like for a few different reasons. One of the more minor things for me, like I found a few like typos or a couple instances of misused words. Overall, like those are things that I could probably like look over for the most part. It was just I noticed them, popping up a bit more than you would really like in a book. But that wasn't even like the biggest thing for me. There are other things like with the writing style I didn't really like, but I will say the writing style in general I think was more of a personal preference. Like it just wasn't my personal favorite. But I could see it totally being someone else's favorite. What really got me with this book though were the characters and the plot in general. So this is a romantasy. So we follow our female lead and the male lead. This is one thing when it came to writing style. It was dual POV. And normally I don't think I have a preference either way. I know some people do. But I will say for this book, I do think that the dual POV was unnecessary because I feel like going from like one character's perspective to another, for the most part, I feel like we were getting the same information. And so I don't know that it was very necessary. I will say there is a plot point later in the book where, there's something one of the characters know and the other one doesn't know because she wasn't there when it happened. And this was important later. It was important that she didn't know this piece of information. But even with that, I feel like you could have accomplished the same effect if it were like in third person, like omniscient. And this might have also played a role in how I ended up feeling about the romance in general. It was just one giant miscommunication trope, but to the point where it got annoying really fast. Part of it might have been, like I said, we're in both characters' heads, so we know how they really feel, but they won't tell each other how they really feel, and it's so frustrating. But what was strange is that there is a point in the book where they do have a heart to heart, and they finally, like, they don't outright confess to each other, but they say the things that they want to say to each other, some doubts that they're having. And like I thought they would have like that they were clearing things up, right? But then like we go to the next scene or next chapter or whatever, and it's like they're still unsure about how the other person feels. I'm like didn't you just have a heart to heart? Like how could you say exactly what you wanted to say and yet like somehow nothing was said in the end? It was so like confusing and frustrating. So like that was one moment. And I remember there was another moment where they finally like came out and like confessed, and they were like, okay, now I know exactly how this person feels for me, and I am secure in that knowledge, right? only for it to be immediately taken away in the next scene. And it's like, oh, now I hate them. And it's like, what? It was like, oh, yes, finally they communicated. But then they went straight back to square one. And it's like, why? Why are we here? And then on that note, with the plot in general, and also like the character development in general, I feel like there wasn't much of either when it comes to the characters. They're bound to have flaws, especially in the beginning. And I will say, like, in the beginning of the book, when we're just meeting these characters for the first time and you see these character flaws, you can look past them. It's acceptable at that point because, like it said, it's the beginning of the story. There's room for improvement, there's room for character development. So, our main male character accidentally gains access to this power and he can't control it, so he doesn't want it. He's looking to get rid of it, right? And he goes to this sorcerer to try to hopefully get it removed. And she can't help him. So it suggested that, like, okay, I'll go to this other person, this king person, right? And then she's immediately like, oh no, don't go to him. He's bad news. And he's like, no, I think I'm gonna go see him anyway. And like I said, at this point, it's still the beginning of the story. And while it doesn't seem like the brightest idea to ignore the warning from a powerful sorceress who like knows what she's talking about, but he does it anyway. And at this point, I'm like, oh, it kind of makes sense. He's been suffering from not being able to control this power that like he never asked to have. It makes sense. I feel for him at that point, right? But the sorceress does mention that, like, oh, you were, the power, like, it chose you, so it was like fate or something. And once she mentioned that, I immediately was hoping that at some point on his journey, he would start to realize, like, maybe I don't have to get rid of the power. Maybe instead I should learn how to control it. Like, find someone who can help me control the power instead of just trying to get rid of it, especially if I want to help my kingdom. That's kind of like the character development I was hoping to see, but that didn't happen. Because later in the book, we meet another character who is also like, the guy that you're trying to go to, don't go to him. He's bad news. Everybody who goes to his kingdom doesn't come back. It's like, don't go there. And he's like, no, I think I'm gonna go there anyway. And then he goes there and then they're immediately captured. And it's like, okay, so this plan failed. It's like, you don't say. Well, duh. What did you think would happen? Anyway, now that they've met the person that they've been searching for, this king that they've been searching for, they were having a conversation. At this point, like, their conversation was repeating information that we were given in the beginning, like the exposition we were given in the beginning, that was being repeated. And at this point, we're like maybe like 75% of the way through, like maybe even 80, I don't quite remember. We were a good way through the story at this point. And this was like maybe the third time at least we've gotten the same information. It's like, why are we repeating this? And it was then that I realized that the plot had been going around in circles the whole time. At least it seemed like. I feel like it did a good job of tricking you. Once our characters come together and like go on their journey, it's like they've traveled to a lot of different places at this point. So it's like I thought we were doing things, right? And like we were doing things, like we were traveling, working our way towards our goal. But then we get there and then I realized, like, we're not getting any new information here. And it's like what was all of this for? And like I said, we were well over halfway through the book at this point. Why hasn't there been any developments? Either with the plot or the characters. They do so much without accomplishing anything. Like everything happens, but nothing happens at the same time. And I think that's what ended up being so frustrating for me. I don't want to like hate on the book though. If you're still interested in reading the book, I won't stop you, but like I would recommend maybe see if your library has it first before purchasing it, just in case. For me personally, I think it didn't do enough, but maybe it'll be enough for you, and I love that for you. We're all learning what we like and what we don't like, and that's okay. That was the only book I read in February, so next up we have what I read in March. I read Days at the Torunka Cafe by Satoshi Yakisawa. And I picked this one up because I read his Days at the Moritaki Bookshop and the sequel, and I love those books. Definitely 5-star reads for me. And so once I heard about this book, I definitely wanted to check it out. Definitely has that cozy feel. One thing I love about these books is the characters, like how the relationships that they have, the bonds that they have or that they form, and just like how these people connect, I think is really beautiful to read about in these stories. I will say though, this one was actually a lot more like the books before the coffee gets cold. Not just because it takes place in a cafe, but also because like each chapter follows the story of a different character, but they are all characters that are connected by this cafe. Like either they work there or they're a customer there, but like it's all connected by this cafe. And so like if you like Before the Coffee Gets Cold, very similar kind of vibe. I will say though, I think one thing I like about this book is, like I said, like everybody's connected by this cafe, but they're not limited. Like the setting isn't limited to the cafe. Like they'll walk around the neighborhood or whatever. I did like that. Not much to say about that one. Like if you like cozy books, definitely check this out. Next up, I read The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller and Circe, also by Madeline Miller. And I did do like a reading vlog on those two books if you wanted to check that out, but if not, I'll still do like a short little review here. Basically, for both the books, I think the writing was very well done. I loved getting to read about these well known myths from a more personal perspective, and also from the perspective of a minor character from the myths. Both stories, we get to see how these characters grow and how their relationships develop. I think both did very well on showcasing the human nature and human emotions. Even though Circe is immortal, like she's not really human, but you get the point. These stories are human stories, even if they are fantastical, mythical. And I definitely do think, although they're fictional stories, I do think they're a good gateway into learning about Greek mythology in general. Like, if that's something you're interested in, or like if you know someone who's like just starting to get into Greek mythology, that this might be a good story to recommend to them. But yeah, that's all I read for the past 2 months. I do hope to start reading more now that we've gotten more settled in the new apartment. But yeah, let me know what you thought of these books, if you liked them, if you've been wanting to read them, anything like that. But in the meantime, that's all I have for you for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.